Welcome to Instant Deck Techs. The aim of this series is to give you a short, concise guide on how to build a certain deck. It won't cover every card, but we'll go through all the categories and go over the types of cards needed to make the deck work. Any card mentioned will be down in the description below.
The commander of this deck is Kosei, Penitent Warlord. It is 1 green for a 0/5 legendary creature Ogre Samurai. It has, as long as Kosei, Penitent Warlord is enchanted, equipped, and has a counter on it, Kosei has, whenever Kosei Penitent Warlord deals combat damage to an opponent, you draw that many cards, and Kosei deals that much damage to each other opponent. This is going to be a mono-green Voltron deck. We'll be suiting up Kosei with all manner of equipment and auras so we can get on with dealing as much damage as quickly as possible. Before we go into each individual section, let's firstly go over what this deck is trying to do, and importantly, how it wins. In a nutshell, we're going to be making Kosei massive and starting hitting our opponents in the life total. To do this, we'll be looking for auras and equipment that can buff it up. We're also going to be looking to get Kosei's ability to activate as quickly as possible, as if we can, that ability is amazing. Drawing cards equal to the damage dealt will lead to us drawing so many cards. Green does have trample, remember. Then the fact it also spreads around the damage to each opponent takes away the main drawback from other Voltron commanders, as importantly this will hit all of our opponents at the same time. To get this ability firing, we're first going to be looking at auras and equipment that also put a counter on Kosei. This will mean we'll take up 2 of the 3 conditions we need to activate it in one card. Most of the counters will be in the form of +1/+1 counters, but ability counters do work as well, so look out for those in the video. We'll also be running some protection to help keep Kosei around, as it will have a big target on its back once our opponents realise how much damage it can do and how many cards we can draw. To finish off the game, we'll have some way of making Kosei get its damage through, so no one will be able to stop us. Okay, moving over to the individual sections, we're going to kick off with the buff effects. These will primarily be on auras and equipment, and are here to get Kosei's ability active and to get it as big as possible. First up are auras and equipment that also put a +1/+1 counter on Kosei. These do everything that we want from an early buff effect. They pump Kosei's power while also putting a counter on it. Again, with these cards, we're 2/3 of the way of turning on Kosei's ability. Sticking with getting counters on Kosei, we have cards like Renata that will put a counter on every creature that we play, and then Loyal Guardian, which puts a counter on Kosei on all of our combat steps. As we mentioned, it doesn't just have to be +1/+1 counters. Ability counters from Lycoria also do the job, and Titanoth Rex and Hornbash Mentor, giving Kosei trample, will be fantastic at getting around any opponent's chump blockers. After those options, the next thing to focus on is making Kosei deal the most damage possible. We're after effects that buff its power or give it something like Double Strike. The more damage we can hit one player for, the more we'll hit each other player for, and also the more cards we'll draw. Some cards that stand out to me are Blanchwood Armor, which can make a creature huge in a mono-green deck like this, and a card like Nettlecyst, which will synergize with all the auras and equipment that we're running. Moving over to our ramp, we have a variety of cool bits that we can run. Because of all the cards we're expecting to draw in this deck, I do like running slightly more ramp than normal so that we can cast everything. First up is cards that get lands out of the deck when we either attack or deal combat damage. One with Nature and Sword of the Animist both help Kosei activate as well, which is great. And Kodama of the West Tree just slots in with everything else the deck is trying to do. After that, we have cards that make mana based on either the power of a creature or the amount of damage that we've done. With all the buff effects we've already gone over, these should easily be able to make us an immense amount of mana. Also, hitting people with an old Gnawbone is a pretty solid backup win condition. Worth mentioning, however, is that we do still need a solid mana base to build from. How you put this together is up to you, but personally I like a little mix of all the things to give you the best chance of not having it all removed in one go. Firstly, mana rocks obviously have a place, with Thought Vessel going up in this deck because we have the potential to be drawing a ton of cards. Then, as we're in green, we have Rampant Growth effects. Perfectly solid at ramping us ahead and making sure we hit our land drops on time. Then we also have cheap mana dorks. As there aren't that many creatures in this deck, these can work as chump blockers when required. And one last card to mention is Karametra's Acolyte. Great in this kind of mono-green deck with loads of auras floating around, adding to our devotion. Moving over to our card draw, we don't need as much of it as a normal deck, as our commander does have it built in. First up is Concord with the Kami. This is a great little card that can help buff Kosei and also draw us some cards. Then, when Kosei is nice and big, we can cast something like Return of the Wildspeaker or Rishkar's Expertise to draw us cards based on a creature's power. Return of the Wildspeaker is also a nice little anthem to buff our whole team as well. Then we have some card draw based on the amount of damage that a creature has dealt, with cards like Hunter's Insight and Hunter's Prowess. There is one additional way you can take the card draw that I want to mention, and that's with some Enchantress effects. You won't be getting full value out of them, as this won't be a full-blown enchantment deck, but with all the auras we're running, you'll definitely be able to use them to draw some additional cards. If you're going this way, adding some wild growth effects to your ramp section will definitely help you with this. Moving over to our interaction, this is one section that mono green can struggle a little at, but we still have some decent options available to us. First up, we have some effects on enchantments that turn a troublesome creature of an opponent's into something a little bit more manageable. The fact that these cards strip any abilities from the creatures they're on makes them really good answers to our opponent's commanders. For some more creature removal, we can also look at some fight spells. Cards like Ancient Animist and Inscription of Abundance are really good includes, as they can also put a counter on a creature. After those, there's some other good solid green removal spells as well, with Beast Within probably being the best bit we have access to, as it can target any permanent. Then we also have cards like Krosan Grip and Rex Sage for answering any pesky artifacts or enchantments. For some board wipes, we can look at some artifacts with things like Neverendul's Disc being able to answer everything at the table. Or we can look at the big mono-green Fight Fest with Azuri's Predation. Moving over to our protection, we need a decent number of it in this deck because a large portion of the strategy involves having our commander out and able to swing. One way we can run more is by having their protection overlap with our buff effects. The Umbra cards that give Totem Armor are great for this. They'll protect Kosei from a removal spell, all while buffing its stats and making it enchanted. After those, we have a nice selection of effects that can give Kosei hexproof. Special mentions to cards like Snakeskin Veil and Slippery Bog Bonder, as they also put a counter on Kosei while giving it that protection. Worth noting, I haven't included Lightning Greaves on the list. It's still a fine card to include, but the fact it gives Shroud is counterintuitive to everything else we're trying to do. One last bit of protection to mention, and that is Vigor. As we're a big green deck, we can cast this pretty easily, and it can make all of our creatures grow super large, all while protecting them in combat. Because most of the damage we'll be doing will be coming from our commander, we don't need to run as much recursion in the deck. What we might want, however, is the ability to bring back an aura or a key bit of equipment that might have been removed. Cards like Eternal Witness and Reviving Melody are great for this kind of thing, and give us that little extra bit of redundancy. Moving over to some dedicated win cons, what we're looking for is some ways of speeding up the amount of damage that we can deal to our opponents. First up is some cards that let Kosei get that damage through. We can give it protection and different kinds of evasion to make it so that we can get Kosei through unblocked. The fact they also counter turning Kosei's ability on is going to be very nice as well. Another way to make sure we get the damage through is with cards like Indomitable Might. It doesn't matter if Kosei is blocked, we can just pass that damage straight through to an opponent. With all the effects to make creatures unblockable, I think this might be a good deck for Giant Ediphage. We shouldn't have any issues casting it, and then if we can make it unblockable and get some attacks in with it, we'll have a pretty impressive board state in no time. I know this card is a little pricey, but if you're going to run a combat trick in Commander, it might as well be the best one, and that's Berserk. Being able to double Kosei's power is worth the trade-off of destroying it at the end step, because with this card there won't be an end step, because all our opponents will be defeated. If you're finding 21 damage is too much to get for a commander damage win, why not make it 10 with Grafted Exoskeleton and some poison counters? Remember, when this is attached to Kosei, if its ability is active and it deals combat damage to a player, that damage, and the damage that's dealt to each opponent, will be poison as well. So if Kosei deals 10 damage to any player with this equipped, you will win the game. Rounding off the deck with some utility lands, as we're in mono green, we have room for a number of different options. First up is lands that let us put counters on a creature. They're all practically free in this deck, and are nice little inclusions. After those, we have some nice bits of utility. We have some recursion with Balaged Recovery, some redundancy with Command Beacon, a win con in Rogue's Passage, some card draw on War Room, and then some lifelink, which I honestly think will be pretty strong on Witch's Clinic. The rest of your mana base will be very dependent on what you have available to you. We've recently released a video with some advice on building a deck with a budget mana base, which might be of help. Until next time, please like, share and subscribe, and let us know down in the comments if there are any commanders you'd like to see a deck tech on. Thank you very much for watching.